In the quiet town of Springfield, every day started the same for 9-year-old Lily Carter, a bright smile, a hurried breakfast, and the familiar walk to Westwood Elementary. No one could have predicted that on April 17, 1999, that routine would be shattered forever, leaving behind only a backpack and unanswered questions that would haunt a community for nearly 2 decades. Until an impossible return would challenge everything they thought they knew about fate. If you're intrigued by this mysterious disappearance, make sure to subscribe for more extraordinary true stories that defy explanation. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds of the Carter family home, casting warm stripes across the worn linoleum floor. Sarah Carter stood at the counter, packing her daughter's lunch. Peanut butter sandwich with the crusts meticulously removed, an apple, and a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in wax paper. It was their daily ritual, one that Sarah cherished. "Lily, breakfast is getting cold," Sarah called up the stairs, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. 9-year-old Lily Carter appeared at the top of the stairs, her uniform slightly rumpled, blonde hair hastily pulled into a ponytail. She descended with the boundless energy only a child could possess at 7:15 in the morning. "Mom, did you sign my permission slip? Miss Jenkins says we can't go to the planetarium without it," Lily asked, sliding into her usual spot at the kitchen table. Sarah nodded, reaching for the well-worn backpack hanging by the door. "It's already in your folder, sweetie, right next to your math homework." From the living room, Mark Carter lowered his newspaper. "All set for your science test today, kiddo?" Lily's nose wrinkled as she shoveled cereal into her mouth. "I think so. Jenny helped me study yesterday. Did you know that Saturn's rings are made of ice and rock?" Mark chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Is that so? Maybe you should be teaching my high school physics class instead." The Carters weren't wealthy by Springfield standards. Mark taught physics at the local high school, and Sarah worked part-time at the library. Their modest 2-story home on Maple Street had chipping paint and creaky floorboards, but it was filled with laughter and warmth. "Don't forget your violin," Sarah reminded, glancing at the clock. "Mrs. Rodriguez won't be happy if you show up empty-handed again." Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. "That was one time, Mom." "One time too many," Sarah replied with a smile, ruffling her daughter's hair. Springfield was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was safe, or at least it had seemed that way, until the Henderson boy disappeared back in the early 80s. The case had never been solved, but it had faded from collective memory, becoming little more than a cautionary tale parents used to make sure their children came home before dark. Perhaps that lingering memory was why Sarah always watched Lily from the porch until she reached the corner of Maple and Elm, where she'd meet up with her best friend Jenny Winters for the rest of the 6-block walk to school. It was a routine as reliable as the seasons. "Got everything?" Sarah asked as Lily hoisted her backpack over her shoulders. "Yup," Lily nodded, adjusting the straps. "Oh, I almost forgot." She darted back to her room and returned clutching a small notebook with unicorns on the cover. "My story for creative writing. I stayed up extra late finishing it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Extra late, huh? That explains the yawning at breakfast." Lily grinned, unrepentant. "It's about a girl who discovers she can talk to animals. Mrs. Peterson says I have a vivid imagination." "That you do," Mark agreed, checking his watch. "But now both of us are going to be late if we don't get moving." The morning routine continued like clockwork. Mark kissed Sarah goodbye, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for his rusty Ford Taurus. Medium-low pitch, clear and confident delivery at 180 words per minute. Maintain a suspenseful and serious tone, but keep the pacing smooth and natural. Avoid over-enunciating or drawing out words. Use light, natural pauses at commas, slightly longer at periods. For quoted dialogue, shift to a more conversational tone appropriate to each character. Keep the narration compelling, focused, and immersive from beginning to end. Lily hugged her mother, promised to be careful crossing streets, and skipped down the front steps, her blonde ponytail bouncing with each step. "Love you, Mom," she called over her shoulder. "Love you more,"
Sarah replied, watching as her daughter's blue uniform disappeared around the corner of Maple and Elm. That was the last time she would see her daughter for 19 years. It wasn't until 3:45 that afternoon, when the school secretary called, that the first threads of panic began to weave through Sarah's chest. "Mrs. Carter, this is Patricia from Westwood Elementary. I'm calling because Lily wasn't in class today, and we haven't received a call from you regarding her absence." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? She left for school this morning. She should have been there." The seconds stretched into minutes as Sarah frantically called Mark, then Jenny's mother, then every parent on Lily's contact list. No one had seen her. Jenny had waited at their usual corner, but when Lily didn't show up, she'd assumed her friend was sick. By 4:30, Officer Dave Mendoza was sitting at the Carters' kitchen table, his notebook open, asking questions Sarah could barely comprehend through her rising hysteria. "And she was wearing her school uniform, the blue one?" Sarah nodded, clutching a tissue. "Yes, and her pink backpack. It has those little heart keychains on the zipper. She had her violin and her unicorn notebook." Mark paced the kitchen, his face ashen. "We need to be out there looking for her, not sitting here answering questions." Officer Mendoza's expression was sympathetic but firm. "We have patrols canvassing the route to school and the surrounding neighborhoods. I need to gather information to coordinate our search effectively." The next hours passed in a blur. Neighbors gathered on the Carters' lawn. Search parties formed, combing through parks, woods, and alleyways. Flyers with Lily's smiling face appeared on telephone poles and store windows throughout Springfield. By nightfall, the local news had picked up the story, and Lily's school photo flashed across television screens throughout the county. Sarah sat motionless on the couch, staring at the phone, willing it to ring with news, any news of her daughter. "She's just lost," she whispered to Mark as darkness fell. "She wandered off and got confused. She'll find her way home." But Lily didn't find her way home that night, or the next, or the night after that. As days stretched into weeks, the investigation intensified. Detectives interviewed school staff, neighbors, and known offenders in the area. They traced Lily's route to school repeatedly, searching for overlooked clues. Divers even checked the murky waters of Willow Creek, though there was no reason to believe Lily had been anywhere near the water that day. The media attention grew, then gradually waned as newer tragedies demanded coverage. The volunteers dwindled. The once bustling command center at Springfield Community Center emptied out, leaving only a core group of dedicated officers and the shattered remains of the Carter family. "There has to be something we're missing," Detective Karen Liu said during a briefing 6 weeks after the disappearance. "Children don't just vanish into thin air." But it seemed Lily had done exactly that. There were no witnesses who had seen her after she turned the corner at Maple and Elm. No surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed her walking past. No suspicious vehicles had been reported in the area. It was as if she had simply stepped out of existence between one heartbeat and the next. The psychological toll on the Carters was devastating. Sarah took a leave of absence from the library that eventually became a resignation. Mark struggled to focus on teaching, his students walking on eggshells around their formerly jovial physics teacher, who now moved through the hallways like a ghost.
Their marriage, once rock solid, began to fracture under the weight of their grief. Mark threw himself into the search, spending evenings and weekends following up on leads the police had long abandoned. Sarah retreated inward, preserving Lily's room exactly as she had left it that April morning, sitting for hours on her daughter's bed, holding the stuffed rabbit Lily had outgrown but couldn't bear to part with. "We can't keep living like this," Mark said one night, 6 months after the disappearance, his voice hoarse from another day of showing Lily's photo to strangers. "We need to find a way forward." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Forward, without knowing what happened to our daughter, without knowing if she's even alive?" The word hung in the air between them, the possibility they had both refused to verbalize until now. "I'm not giving up on finding her," Mark clarified, his own anger rising to meet hers. "I'm saying we can't let this destroy us. Lily wouldn't want that." "Don't you dare tell me what Lily would want," Sarah hissed, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get to use her like that." Their arguments became more frequent, their reconciliations more temporary. By the 1-year anniversary of Lily's disappearance, Mark had moved into an apartment across town. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, another casualty of the tragedy that had befallen their family. As the years passed, Springfield gradually returned to normal, or a new version of normal that accommodated the absence of one small girl. Parents were more vigilant about watching their children walk to school. The elementary school installed security cameras and implemented strict check-in procedures. Lily's case remained open but inactive, gathering dust in a filing cabinet at the Springfield Police Department. Sarah never moved from the house on Maple Street, clinging to the hope that if Lily somehow found her way home, she would come looking for the white 2-story with the blue shutters and the maple tree in the front yard. She kept her daughter's room untouched, a shrine to a childhood frozen in time. Mark eventually relocated to Chicago, where he took a position at a private school and remarried. But twice a year, on Lily's birthday and the anniversary of her disappearance, he returned to Springfield, meeting with Detective Liu, who had long since been promoted to captain, to ask the same question. Anything new? The answer was always the same, until it wasn't. For Sarah, the years blurred together in a haze of grief and routine. She found work as a bookkeeper for a local florist, a job that required minimal interaction with others. Her circle of friends had dwindled to almost nothing. It was too painful to watch their children grow up, graduate, start families of their own. On the rare occasions when she ventured into the supermarket or post office, she still caught people staring, whispering behind their hands. Poor Sarah Carter, the mother of that missing girl, the one who never moved on. She had learned to ignore the pitying glances, the awkward attempts at conversation. She had built a life around the absence at its center, a life of quiet routines and lowered expectations. It wasn't happiness, but it was survival. And then, 19 years after Lily walked down Maple Street and vanished, everything changed. The call came on a Tuesday evening as Sarah was watering the potted geraniums on her front porch, Lily's favorite flowers, which she had faithfully replanted every spring since the disappearance. "Mrs. Carter, this is James Reed. I'm a retired detective from the county sheriff's office." Sarah's hand tightened around the phone. "Yes? I've been reviewing some cold cases in my spare time, and I came across your daughter's file. I was wondering if I might stop by to discuss a few things with you." Sarah hesitated. Over the years, there had been others, true crime enthusiasts, amateur sleuths, even a psychic once, all promising new insights into Lily's case, all eventually admitting defeat. "I understand your reluctance," Reed continued when she didn't immediately respond, "but I've found something in the evidence that I think was overlooked, something that might be important." Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed to meet him the following afternoon. James Reed was not what she had expected. In his mid-60s, with a shock of white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and somehow retained his faith in justice. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Carter," he said, accepting the cup of tea she offered. "I know you've been through this many times before." Sarah nodded, taking a seat across from him at the kitchen table. "What exactly did you find, Mr. Reed?" Reed opened a worn leather portfolio and removed a photograph, one Sarah had never seen before. It showed Maple Street on the morning of Lily's disappearance, taken by a neighbor documenting spring flowers for a gardening blog. In the background, barely visible, was a small figure in a blue uniform at the corner of Maple and Elm. "This photo was submitted to police the week after Lily disappeared," Reed explained, "but it was filed away and apparently never analyzed closely." Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. That's Lily. That's her at the corner where she was supposed to meet Jenny. Reed nodded. Yes, but look at this. He pointed to a notation on the back of the photo, written in faded pencil. She's not the same. What does that mean? Sarah whispered, her fingers hovering over the cryptic message. That's what I'm trying to find out, Reed replied. The neighbor who took this photo, Mrs. Eleanor Simmons, died several years ago. But her son mentioned she had been concerned about something she saw that morning, something that didn't seem right. Unfortunately, when police interviewed her initially, they were focused on whether she had seen any suspicious vehicles or strangers in the area, not on Lily herself. Sarah stared at the photo, at the tiny figure of her daughter frozen in time. You think something had happened to Lily before she disappeared? That she was different somehow? Reed's expression was grave. I think it's a possibility we need to explore. And there's something else. He removed another item from his portfolio, a printout of a call log. During the initial investigation, police checked phone records for unusual activity in the area. They found a call made to a payphone 2 blocks from your house, about 20 minutes before Lily would have left for school that morning. From whom? Sarah asked, her mouth suddenly dry. The number was untraceable, a burner phone, most likely. But what's interesting is that the same number called that payphone every morning for a week before Lily disappeared, always at the same time. Sarah's mind raced with implications. You think someone was, what, planning this? Watching our house? Watching Lily? It's possible, Reed acknowledged, which brings me to my most significant discovery. The detective who originally worked your daughter's case, Thomas Grayson, kept personal notes separate from the official case file. After he passed away last year, his widow found them in his effects and turned them over to the department. Reed pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Grayson noted that during a canvass of the neighborhood the day after Lily disappeared, an elderly resident mentioned seeing her talking to someone at that payphone on her way to school several times in the weeks before she vanished. Who? Sarah demanded, her voice rising. Who was she talking to? The witness couldn't say for certain, just that it appeared to be an adult, and that Lily seemed comfortable with them, not afraid. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Are you saying Lily knew whoever took her? That's impossible. She would have told me if a stranger approached her. Not necessarily a stranger, Reed said carefully. The witness described the person as familiar-looking, though they couldn't identify them specifically. The implications were staggering. For 19 years, Sarah had imagined a random abduction, a predator spotting Lily walking alone and seizing a terrible opportunity. The thought that her daughter's disappearance might have been premeditated, that Lily might have been groomed by someone she trusted, opened an entirely new dimension of horror. There's one more thing, Reed said, his voice gentler now. Grayson had an old cell phone in his personal effects, one that wasn't part of the official evidence. His widow says he kept it because there was something on it related to Lily's case that troubled him deeply. What was it? Sarah whispered. A voicemail, received the morning Lily disappeared. The number is blocked, but the voice... Reed hesitated. Mrs. Carter, I think you should hear it yourself. He placed a small digital recorder on the table between them and pressed play. The voice that emerged was distorted, deliberately disguised, but the message was chillingly clear. She's safe. Don't try to find her. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. For nearly 2 decades, she had lived with uncertainty. Was Lily alive or dead? Had she suffered? Was she still suffering somewhere? The message suggested an answer to at least one of those questions. Lily had been taken by someone who, at least initially, didn't intend to harm her. Why? She choked out. Why wasn't this investigated? Why wasn't I told? Reed's expression was troubled. I can't answer that with certainty. Grayson's notes suggest he received this message personally, not through official channels, and that he was concerned about corruption within the department. He seems to have been conducting a parallel investigation on his own. Corruption? In Springfield? The idea seemed absurd. Their small-town police force dealt primarily with speeding tickets and the occasional drunken disorderly. "I don't know the details," Reed admitted, "but I intend to find out. With your permission, I'd like to reopen this investigation privately. I still have contacts in law enforcement who can help access resources without going through official channels, at least until we know who we can trust." Sarah stared at the items spread across her kitchen table, tangible evidence that her daughter's case was not as cold as everyone had believed. For the first time in years, she felt something stir within her chest. Hope, dangerous and fragile. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Reed's smile was grim but determined. "Everything you can remember about the days and weeks leading up to Lily's disappearance. Any changes in her behavior, new people in her life, unusual events. No detail is too small." As Sarah began to speak, memories long suppressed rising to the surface, neither of them could have imagined how their conversation would set in motion a chain of events that would shock not just Springfield, but the entire nation. The news that James Reed, a respected former detective, was reopening the Carter case spread through Springfield like wildfire. Local media, always eager for updates on what had become the town's most notorious unsolved mystery, descended on the police department demanding statements. Captain Karen Liu, who had been a detective on the original case, found herself fielding questions she had no answers for. "The department is aware that Mr. Reed has taken an interest in the case," she told reporters gathered outside the station. "While we appreciate his dedication, this remains an open investigation under police jurisdiction." Behind closed doors, however, Liu was more forthcoming with her former colleagues. "Reed's on to something," she confided to Detective Marcus Washington, who had joined the force years after Lily's disappearance, but knew the case well. "Grayson was acting strange in those final months before he retired. Secretive. I thought it was just the cancer diagnosis making him withdraw, but maybe there was more to it." Washington leaned back in his chair, considering. "You think there's something to these corruption allegations?" Lou's expression was troubled. "I don't know. Springfield was different back then. Chief Holloway ran things his way, and questions weren't exactly encouraged, and there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "That certain investigations got buried, that certain people were untouchable." She shook her head. "Nothing concrete, nothing I could prove, but enough to make me wonder." Meanwhile, Reed had set up a makeshift investigation center in his home office, walls covered with timelines, photographs, and maps. Sarah visited daily, bringing coffee and contributing her own recollections to the growing body of evidence. "I've been thinking about what you asked," she said one afternoon, watching Reed pin a new document to his board, about changes in Lily's behavior before she disappeared. Reed turned, giving her his full attention, and, "There was something. About 2 weeks before it happened, she started asking questions about her birth certificate." Reed's eyebrows rose. "What kind of questions?" Sarah twisted her hands in her lap. "She wanted to know where it was kept. She said her teacher was doing a project on family history, and they needed to bring in birth certificates. I showed her where I kept it in my filing cabinet, but the project never materialized. When I asked her teacher about it later, after Lily was gone, Miss Jenkins had no idea what I was talking about." Reed made a note in his book. "Did you notice the birth certificate missing at any point?" Sarah shook her head. "No, it was always there. But I've been wondering, why would she ask about that specifically?" "Good question," Reed murmured. "Very good question." The investigation gained momentum. Reed leveraged his connections to access sealed records, interview witnesses who had been overlooked in the original investigation, and dig into the backgrounds of everyone connected to the case, including former Chief Holloway and Detective Grayson. What emerged was a disturbing pattern. In the years preceding Lily's disappearance, several other cases had been mishandled under Holloway's leadership, evidence misplaced, witnesses intimidated, investigations prematurely closed. Nothing as serious as a child abduction, but enough to suggest a systemic problem. "I think Grayson suspected something bigger was happening," Reed told Sarah as they reviewed his findings, "something that went beyond normal police incompetence. That's why he kept separate notes, why he held on to that cell phone." "But what does any of this have to do with Lily?" Sarah asked, the question that had haunted her for 19 years, still unanswered. Reed's response was interrupted by his phone ringing. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "I need to take this. Excuse me." Sarah watched as he stepped into the hallway, his voice low and urgent. When he returned, his expression had changed. There was a new tension in his shoulders, a glint in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "That was my contact at the State Crime Lab," he said. "They've been running the fingerprints from Grayson's cell phone through the system. Most were his, as expected, but they found a partial print that matches someone unexpected, a man named Victor Chambers." The name meant nothing to Sarah. "Who is he?" "He was a local businessman back when Lily disappeared, owned a few properties around town, including an apartment complex on the north side. He left Springfield about a year after Lily went missing, reportedly moved to the West Coast." Sarah frowned. "I don't remember anyone by that name. Was he connected to the police department?" "Not officially," Reed replied, "but my contact says there were rumors that Chambers had Holloway in his pocket, that he made problems disappear for the right price." "What kind of problems?" Reed's expression darkened. "The kind that involve undocumented workers in his buildings, the kind that involve cutting corners on safety regulations. Nothing violent, at least nothing that came to light, but definitely someone who operated in legal gray areas." "And you think he had something to do with Lily?" Sarah's voice caught on her daughter's name. "I think his fingerprint on a phone containing a message about your daughter's safety is significant, yes." The investigation took on new urgency. Reed dug into Victor Chambers' background, discovering that the man had indeed relocated to California, where he had established a modestly successful real estate development company before his death in a boating accident 5 years earlier. "Dead end," Reed muttered, reviewing the death certificate, literally. But as they continued to unravel the connections between Chambers and Springfield, something unexpected emerged. Chambers had maintained ownership of several properties in town long after his departure, including a small office building downtown that had remained vacant for years. "Property taxes paid regularly, utilities maintained, but no tenants," Reed noted, scanning the records. "Why keep an empty building for almost 2 decades? With Captain Lou's reluctant assistance, they obtained a warrant to search the building. What they found inside was minimal: dust-covered furniture, filing cabinets emptied long ago, a reception area frozen in the late 1990s. But in a small room at the back, behind a false wall that Lou's officers discovered during their sweep, they found something that changed everything: a locked safe. The media exploded with speculation when news of the discovery leaked. Television crews camped outside the building as technicians worked to open the safe, which had been secured with an advanced electronic lock that resisted conventional methods. "Whatever's in there, Chambers wanted it well protected," Reed observed, watching the technicians work. When they finally breached the safe 3 days later, its contents were simultaneously disappointing and intriguing. A single USB drive, at least 15 years old based on its design, and a handwritten note that read simply, "Insurance." The drive was taken to the State Crime Lab for analysis, its contents potentially corrupted by age and environmental factors. The wait for results was excruciating, with Sarah calling Reed hourly for updates. "Nothing yet," he told her repeatedly. "These things take time." When the call finally came, Reed drove straight to Sarah's house, his expression giving away nothing as he sat her down at the kitchen table. "They recovered data from the drive," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Most of it was financial records, offshore accounts, tax evasion schemes, evidence of bribes paid to various officials, including Chief Holloway." Sarah's shoulders slumped. "So it was about corruption, not about Lily at all." "Not entirely," Reed replied. "There was also a folder labeled Carter. Inside was a series of photographs, surveillance photos of your house, of Lily walking to school, of you and Mark. And there was a document, a contract of sorts." Sarah's blood ran cold. "A contract for what?" Reed hesitated. "It appears to be an arrangement for Lily's placement. There are references to a substantial payment and specifications about her care." "Placement?" Sarah repeated, the word foreign and horrifying. "Are you saying someone paid to have my daughter kidnapped?" "Not exactly," Reed said slowly.
The language suggests something more complex. There's mention of the child's potential and specialized education, and a name, the Verto Initiative. What is that? Some kind of organization? "I don't know yet," Reed admitted. "There's no record of any organization by that name in any database I've checked. But there was one more thing on the drive, a series of annual reports, like progress updates, continuing until 2010. They don't mention Lily by name, but they refer to the subject and detail educational achievements, aptitude tests, developmental milestones." Sarah's mind struggled to process the implications. "You're saying someone took Lily to, what, train her for something, study her, and they kept records?" "That's what it looks like," Reed confirmed. "The reports are clinical, detached, but there's no indication of abuse or mistreatment. Quite the opposite. They emphasize emotional well-being and social integration along academic progress." "I don't understand," whispered. "Why Lily? Why our family?" Reed shook his head. "I don't know yet, but the last report mentions something called Phase 2 and references a transition to independent operations. After that, the reports stop." The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. What had begun as a reopened missing persons case had morphed into something far more complex, a conspiracy involving local corruption, mysterious organizations, and the planned abduction of a child for purposes still unclear. National media descended on Springfield, transforming the quiet town into a circus of speculation and rumor. The FBI officially joined the investigation, bringing resources that dwarfed anything the local police could provide. For Sarah, the new developments brought a confusing mixture of hope and horror. The evidence suggested Lily had survived her abduction, had been cared for, educated, but it also painted a picture of calculated manipulation that was almost more disturbing than random violence. "I need to know who these people are," she told Reed as they watched FBI agents establish a command center in the community hall. "I need to know why they chose my daughter." Reed squeezed her hand. "We're getting closer, Sarah. I promise you that." The investigation's focus shifted to identifying the Verto Initiative. Agents combed through corporate records, nonprofit registrations, and educational institutions, finding nothing under that exact name. "It could be a code name," suggested FBI Special Agent Diane Foster, the lead investigator assigned to the case. "Or it might operate under different legal entities." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A graduate student in computer science at MIT, fascinated by the case after reading about it online, ran the term Verto through various language translation programs. "It's Latin," he wrote in an email to the tip line established for the case. "It means to turn or to transform, but it's also the root of the English word convert,
might be relevant? Agent Foster seized on this linguistic clue, directing her team to search for organizations with names related to transformation, conversion, or change, particularly those involved in education or child development. Within days, they had a potential match. The Metamorphosis Foundation, established in 1997 by a reclusive tech entrepreneur named Alexander Mercer. The foundation described itself as dedicated to identifying and nurturing exceptional human potential through innovative educational approaches. "This has to be it," Foster declared, reviewing the foundation's materials. "The timing fits, the mission statement aligns with the language in those reports, and look at this. Their logo is a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, a visual representation of Verto, transformation."
Further investigation revealed that the Metamorphosis Foundation operated a network of private educational facilities across the country, all extremely exclusive, all shrouded in secrecy under the guise of protecting their students' privacy. They claim to work with gifted children whose abilities are beyond conventional educational systems, Foster explained during a briefing. Very limited public presence, no advertising, invitation-only enrollment. How do they identify these children? Reed asked, the question that had been nagging at him since they discovered the Verto initiative. That's where it gets interesting, Foster replied. They have a network of talent scouts, psychologists, teachers, pediatricians who refer children showing exceptional abilities. But there are rumors that they sometimes identify candidates through less conventional means. Like abduction? Sarah's voice was barely audible. Foster's expression was grim. "We don't have evidence of multiple abductions, but we're looking into it." As the investigation into the Metamorphosis Foundation deepened, a parallel development captured national attention. A young tech entrepreneur named Ethan Barnes, founder and CEO of a rapidly growing investment firm called Verto Capital, announced a major new funding round for his company. At 28 years old, Barnes was already a minor celebrity in financial circles, a self-made billionaire whose uncanny ability to identify emerging markets and technologies had earned him comparisons to a young Warren Buffett. His announcement, made during a live-streamed press conference from Verto Capital's San Francisco headquarters, would normally have been of interest only to the business world. But something about Barnes caught the attention of Melissa Chen, a journalist who had been covering the Lily Carter case for a national news magazine. Watching the press conference, Chen was struck by Barnes' appearance. Something in his mannerisms, his expressions, triggered a memory. Pulling up photos of Lily Carter, Chen began a side-by-side comparison. The resemblance wasn't obvious at first glance. Barnes was male, with short dark hair and a closely trimmed beard, while Lily had been a blonde little girl. But certain features aligned. The shape of the eyes, the distinctive curve of the jawline, a small scar near the chin that Barnes attempted to conceal with his beard. Most compelling was a nervous habit Barnes displayed during the press conference, tucking his hair behind his ear when answering difficult questions, exactly as Sarah had described Lily doing when she was concentrating on a problem. Chen reached out to Agent Foster with her observations, sending a detailed analysis of the physical similarities and behavioral patterns. Foster, initially skeptical, agreed to look into Barnes' background. What they found was troubling. Ethan Barnes had seemingly emerged from nowhere 5 years earlier, when he founded Verto Capital with seed money from anonymous investors. His official biography claimed he had been educated at elite private institutions before attending Stanford, but attempts to verify these details led to dead ends. His background is meticulously constructed, Foster reported. All the right paperwork exists, but when we dig deeper, there's nothing substantive behind it. No former classmates who remember him, no professors who can speak specifically about his work. It's as if he was inserted into the record fully formed. The most significant connection, however, came when they discovered that Alexander Mercer, founder of the Metamorphosis Foundation, was listed among Verto Capital's earliest investors. This can't be coincidence, Reed insisted during a strategy meeting. The name of the company, Verto, matches the code name of the initiative that took Lily. The founder has connections to Mercer, and the timing aligns perfectly with when the progress reports mentioned independent operations.
Are you suggesting that Ethan Barnes is actually Lily Carter? Foster asked, the question hanging in the air like a thundercloud. I'm suggesting we need to consider the possibility, Reed replied carefully. We know the Metamorphosis Foundation was involved in Lily's disappearance. We know they emphasized education and development. What if their goal was to transform her into someone else entirely? The theory was outlandish, unprecedented, and yet, as they assembled the evidence, it began to seem increasingly plausible. The final piece fell into place when they discovered that Verto Capital had recently opened a small satellite office in Springfield, in the same building where they had found Victor Chambers' safe. "He's coming back," Sarah whispered when Reed shared this information. "Whoever he is, he's coming back to where it all began." The announcement came 3 days later. Ethan Barnes would be visiting Verto Capital's new Springfield office for its official opening, his first public appearance in the town. The media frenzy reached fever pitch, with journalists connecting the dots between Barnes' visit and the reopened investigation into Lily Carter's disappearance. Barnes' team issued a statement dismissing the speculation as wild conspiracy theories and threatening legal action against anyone making unfounded accusations. But they did not cancel the visit. On a crisp morning in October, 19 years and 6 months after Lily Carter disappeared on her way to school, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside the newly renovated office building in downtown Springfield. A small crowd had gathered behind police barricades, curious locals, reporters, and a contingent of FBI agents pretending to be neither. Among them stood Sarah Carter, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might burst from her chest. Beside her, James Reed kept a steadying hand on her elbow. "Remember," he murmured, "we don't approach, we just observe. Foster's team will handle the rest." Sarah nodded mutely, her eyes fixed on the SUV's door as it opened. Ethan Barnes emerged into the autumn sunlight, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair swept back from his forehead. He paused, surveying the crowd with a slight furrow between his brows, before raising a hand in acknowledgment of the scattered applause. And then, for just a moment, his gaze locked with Sarah. Time seemed to stop. 19 years of grief, of uncertainty, of desperate hope, all crystallized in that single moment of connection. Sarah saw something flicker in Barnes' eyes, recognition, fear, longing, she couldn't be sure, before his expression smoothed into professional neutrality and he turned toward the building. But it was enough. In that brief exchange, Sarah knew with absolute certainty what the DNA test the FBI would soon confirm. Ethan Barnes was her daughter, Lily Carter. The revelation that rocked Springfield soon reverberated across the nation. When FBI agents approached Barnes after the ribbon-cutting ceremony with a warrant for a DNA sample, he did not resist. Instead, he requested a private room and asked for Sarah Carter to be present. In a small conference room on the second floor of the building, mother and child faced each other for the first time in nearly 2 decades. "I knew this day would come eventually," Barnes said, his voice deeper than Sarah had imagined her daughters would become, but with familiar cadences that made her heart ache. Are you really Lily?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking on the name. Barnes, or Lily, smiled sadly. "Biologically, yes, the DNA will confirm that. But I haven't been Lily Carter for a very long time."
The story that emerged over the following days, as DNA tests confirmed Barnes' identity and federal investigators pieced together evidence from multiple sources, was more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined.
Lily Carter had indeed been targeted by the Metamorphosis Foundation, identified through routine cognitive testing in kindergarten as possessing exceptional analytical abilities and pattern recognition skills. Victor Chambers, serving as a local facilitator for the foundation, had arranged her abduction after attempts to approach the Carters legally had been deemed too risky. They had approached other families before, offering scholarships to their special academy, Barnes explained during a closed-door session with federal investigators, Sarah and Reed present as observers. But they'd faced resistance, legal challenges. Some parents weren't willing to give up control of their children's education, even with financial incentives. So for certain candidates, the most promising ones, they developed alternative methods. After her abduction, Lily had been taken to a remote campus in the Pacific Northwest, one of several operated by the foundation. There, alongside a small cohort of other exceptional children, some there by their parents' choice, others like Lily, she received an education that went far beyond conventional curriculum. It wasn't just academics, Barnes continued. They were obsessed with potential. Not just intellectual, but psychological, emotional, even physical. Every aspect of our development was monitored, optimized. We had the best teachers, the best resources. But we were also experiments, in a way. They wanted to see how far human capability could be pushed in the right environment. As the children grew, they were gradually given more autonomy, allowed to specialize in areas that matched their abilities. Lily, showing remarkable aptitude for financial systems and predictive modeling, was steered toward economics and market analysis. By the time I was 15, I was managing a simulated investment portfolio that outperformed most professional fund managers, Barnes recalled. By 17, they were using my models to make actual market trades with spectacular results. The foundation's ultimate goal, it emerged, was to create a network of exceptionally capable individuals who would eventually occupy positions of influence across various sectors: finance, technology, politics, medicine, guided by the foundation's philosophy of optimized human potential. But something unexpected happened as Lily and her peers matured. They began to question the ethics of the program that had shaped them. We were raised in isolation, told we were special, different from ordinary people, Barnes explained. But as we gained access to more information, began interacting with the outside world through controlled channels, some of us started to recognize the moral bankruptcy of what had been done to us. We were victims, but we were being groomed to perpetuate the same system that had victimized us. A small group of students, led by Lily, began a covert rebellion. Using the skills the foundation had instilled in them, they created hidden communications channels, gathered evidence of the foundation's illegal activities, and planned their escape. We knew we couldn't just leave and go public, Barnes said. The foundation had too much influence, too many connections. We needed to be strategic. So we decided to play the long game. At 19, Lily and several others were allowed to attend university as part of their Phase 2 development, still monitored by the foundation, but with greater freedom of movement. It was then that Lily made a radical decision: to completely reinvent herself. I knew they would be looking for a young woman, Barnes explained. So I became someone else entirely. With help from allies she had cultivated during her university years, Lily underwent a physical transformation, cutting her hair, binding her chest, adopting male mannerisms and speech patterns. She created a new identity, Ethan Barnes, with meticulous attention to detail, using skills the foundation itself had taught her. The irony wasn't lost on me, Barnes said with a grim smile. They trained us to understand systems so we could manipulate them. I just turned that ability back on them. As Ethan Barnes, she established Verdo Capital, deliberately echoing the code name of the initiative that had stolen her childhood. With seed money from investors who believed in her financial models, including, in a final twist of irony, Alexander Mercer himself, who never recognized his former student in her new identity, she built a company that quickly became a powerhouse in technology investment. I named it Verdo partly as a private joke, partly as a reminder of where I came from, Barnes admitted, and partly because that's what the foundation did. They tried to transform us, turn us into something else. But in the end, I transformed myself on my own terms. All the while, Barnes and his allies were gathering evidence against the Metamorphosis Foundation, documenting its illegal activities and building a case that could withstand legal scrutiny. The Springfield office wasn't just a business expansion, Barnes revealed. It was about coming back to where it all began, accessing whatever records might still exist here. I knew it was risky, that it might expose my true identity, but it was a calculated risk. What Barnes hadn't anticipated was the reopening of Lily Carter's case by James Reed, or the speed with which the connections would be made. In a way, it's a relief, Barnes confessed, looking directly at Sarah for the first time since the revelations began. Living a double life, it takes a toll. Part of me has wanted to reach out to you for years, but I couldn't risk it, not until we had enough evidence to bring down the foundation. The aftermath of these revelations was seismic. Federal agents raided Metamorphosis Foundation facilities across the country, discovering evidence of numerous other abductions, financial crimes, and an influence network that extended into the highest levels of government and industry. Alexander Mercer was arrested attempting to flee the country, along with several other Foundation executives. Former Chief Holloway, now in his 70s, was charged as an accomplice in Lily's abduction. The full extent of the conspiracy was still being untangled, with new revelations emerging weekly. For Sarah Carter, the discovery that her daughter was alive brought indescribable joy, complicated by the reality that Lily no longer existed as she had known her. Ethan Barnes was a stranger, in many ways, brilliant, driven, shaped by experiences Sarah could barely comprehend. Their first private conversation, held in Sarah's kitchen where so many family memories had been formed, was tentative, weighted with 2 decades of separation. "I remember this house," Barnes said, running a hand along the countertop where Sarah had once packed lunches. "Not everything. My memories of before are fragmented. But I remember the maple tree out front. I remember a rabbit stuffed animal." "Mr. Hoppy," Sarah supplied, tears welling in her eyes. "You slept with him every night until you were 7, then decided you were too grown up for stuffed animals, but you still kept him on your bookshelf." Barnes smiled faintly. "I used to imagine conversations with you. Even after they told me you had moved on, that you and Dad had divorced and it was better for everyone if I stayed away. I didn't fully believe them, but I was young, and they controlled all my information. By the time I was old enough to question it, I was so deep into my new identity." "I never moved on," Sarah said fiercely. "Never. I kept your room exactly as you left it. I kept looking for you every day for 19 years. Barnes nodded, swallowing hard. "I know that now, and I'm so sorry for what you went through. If I could change it, but you can't," Sarah finished for him. "None of us can. We can only go forward from here." The question of how to go forward was complex. Legally, Lily Carter was still a missing person. Ethan Barnes was a legally established identity with a social security number, tax records, a passport. The FBI was working with federal prosecutors to determine how to handle the unprecedented situation. More challenging were the personal implications. Mark Carter, contacted at his home in Chicago, was overwhelmed by the news that his daughter was alive and living as a man. His initial shock gave way to a cautious desire to reconnect, though the reunion was awkward, laden with unasked questions. For Barnes, the exposure of his birth identity created professional challenges as well.
Verto Capital's stock initially plummeted as investors panicked, then stabilized as the extraordinary story captured public imagination. Barnes took a temporary leave of absence to cooperate with the federal investigation, appointing his chief operating officer as interim CEO. Throughout it all, Sarah remained a steadfast presence, defending her child's choices to the media, to skeptical neighbors, to family members struggling to understand the transformation. "I lost my daughter once," she told a reporter who questioned how she could accept Barnes as Lily. "I'm not going to lose her again because I can't open my mind to who she's become." As spring returned to Springfield, bringing with it the anniversary of Lily's disappearance, Barnes invited Sarah to visit Verto Capital's San Francisco headquarters. It was there, in a sleek office overlooking the bay, that Barnes shared the full extent of what the Metamorphosis Foundation had taken and what remained. "They stole my childhood," Barnes said, watching the sunset paint the water golden. "They stole my identity, my connection to you and Dad, my chance at a normal life, but they couldn't take everything." From a drawer in the desk, Barnes removed a small, worn notebook with unicorns on the cover. "I kept this, all these years, through everything. It was the one thing I managed to hold on to from before." Sarah recognized it immediately. Lily's creative writing notebook, the one she had been so proud of the morning she disappeared. With trembling hands, she opened it, finding pages filled with a child's handwriting, stories about talking animals and magical adventures. "I added to it over the years," Barnes explained, turning to the later pages where the handwriting matured, the stories growing more complex. "Whenever I felt lost or forgot who I really was beneath all the layers, I would write in this. It kept me, tethered somehow." The final entry, dated just days earlier, was a letter addressed to Sarah, a letter that began, "Dear Mom," and ended, "Love, Lily/Ethan." "I'm still figuring out who I am," Barnes admitted, as Sarah read, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan Barnes is real. I built him, lived as him, achieved things as him that I'm proud of. But Lily is still in here too, in ways I'm only beginning to understand." Sarah set the notebook down and took her child's hands in hers. "You don't have to choose," she said simply. "You can be both. You can be whoever you need to be. I'll love you either way." In the months that followed, Springfield gradually adjusted to its new status as the center of a national sensation. Tourists visited the corner of Maple and Elm, taking selfies where Lily Carter had last been seen. The elementary school established a scholarship in her name for students showing exceptional promise. The Metamorphosis Foundation's network was dismantled piece by piece, its facilities repurposed as legitimate educational centers, its accumulated wealth used to establish a fund for the victims and their families. Other children who had been taken were reunited with parents who had never stopped searching, while those whose abductions had occurred so long ago that their original families were gone were offered support in building new lives.
Barnes divided time between running Verto Capital and assisting the ongoing investigation, testifying before congressional committees about the Foundation's activities, and advocating for stronger protections for gifted children who might be targeted by similar organizations. Sarah sold the house on Maple Street, finally ready to leave behind the shrine to a lost childhood and move to a comfortable apartment in San Francisco, close enough to see her child regularly but maintaining the independence both of them needed. On the 20th anniversary of Lily's disappearance, Barnes held a private commemoration on the rooftop garden of Verto Capital's headquarters. In attendance were Sarah and Mark, reunited not as a couple but as parents sharing both grief for what was lost and gratitude for what had been found. James Reed, whose determination had cracked open a case everyone else had abandoned. And a small group of the other transformed children, now adults forging their own paths in the world. As the sun set over the bay, Barnes raised a glass. "To lost children everywhere," the toast began. "May they find their way home, even if home becomes something they never expected." Later, as the gathering dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with her child at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the glittering city. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. All of it, the pain, the separation, the transformation. Would you change it if you could? Barnes considered the question for a long moment. I would change how it happened, came the eventual reply. The deception, the trauma, the years you spent not knowing if I was alive or dead. But the person I've become, the work I'm doing, the life I've built? A smile, reminiscent of the one Sarah remembered on a 9-year-old's face, spread slowly. I wouldn't trade that, and I think that's the greatest revenge against the Foundation, that despite everything they did wrong, I found my way to something right. Sarah nodded, understanding. Her daughter had vanished on a spring morning 2 decades ago, walking to school in a blue uniform. What had returned was something different, not better or worse, just transformed. A child's potential realized in ways no one could have predicted, through paths no one would have chosen. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Lily or Ethan or whoever you choose to be, I'm so proud of who you've become. As night fell over San Francisco, mother and child stood side by side, watching the lights of the city below, each one representing a story, a life, a possibility. The past could not be undone. The years of separation could not be reclaimed. But the future stretched before them, unwritten and full of promise. For Sarah Carter, who had lived 19 years with only memories and hope, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.